Hello everybody, welcome to another edition of Weekly Insight. My name is Michael Hennessy. I'm the pastor of Cornerstone Church here in Sydney, and if you're ever in our area, I say this every time we do these things, you are more than welcome to attend one of our services. We would love to get to know you. I've been doing a series over the last couple of weeks entitled Called to Reach Up. As Christians, we're all called to reach out and be a blessing to people around us, but in order to do that more effectively, sometimes we have to stop and reach up and make contact with God. I spoke in the last video session that we did. I spoke on the subject of being serious and taking our crisis seriously. There's a verse in 2 Kings chapter 19 verse 1. I'll bring it up here that proves that point. It's 2 Kings chapter 19 verse 1. It says the following. It says, as soon as Hezekiah heard the news, he tore off his clothes in sorrow and put on sackcloth. Then he went into the temple of the Lord. You know, it's so interesting because, you know, if we're called to reach up, and there are times when we don't have an alternative, we have to reach up. We have to take things seriously. Hezekiah did that when he tore his clothes. That was a sign he was being serious before God. But he also put on sackcloth, and he also sat in ashes, which was a sign that he was prepared to make a sacrifice in order to get God's attention. And that's a principle we can all follow. We can all apply to our lives when we're going through a crisis. You know, we need to make the sacrifice. Now let me explain what I'm talking about, because as Christians we believe in the principle of fasting. Why do we fast for? You know, it's not a form of dieting. It's not a form of trying to lose weight. It's a way of getting God's attention. It really is. And when Christians, when they make the sacrifice to give up food for a certain period of time, or anything else for that matter, they may make the sacrifice of giving up watching TV or drinking coffee or anything like that, and they make the extra effort to give up that sort of thing and to seek God. You know, that draws the favor of God to us and enables us to effectively reach up to God, and He helps us. You know, there's a verse in James that's very, very interesting. Let me just read it out to you. It says here, in James chapter 4 verse 6, it says, but He gives more grace. Therefore, He says, God resists the proud, but He gives grace to the humble. Now, there's another verse I noticed in Psalms about this subject. Okay, God does give grace to those who choose to make the sacrifice and seek Him. But here's another verse I think is very, very important, and it's something that we can apply to our own lives when we're going through a crisis and we need God's help. It says here in Psalms chapter 9, verse 12, it says, for He remembers them, the seekers of bloodshed. He forgets not the cry of the humble. If you choose to make the effort to worship, to make the effort to fast, to make the effort to seek God, make the extra effort to do that, God will not forget you. That's a promise we have from the Bible. He will not forget you. You know, when I was living in Estonia, there was a couple in a church that I was pastoring for a couple of years, and they were basically our worship team. They were a married couple. The guy played keyboards, and the lady, she was our main worship leader. She played guitar, and unfortunately circumstances dictated that they had to split up. And the husband, he left the wife for another woman for a time, and you know, he left the church, and his life just went on a downward spiral really, really fast. But the lady, the wife, and she had a little daughter, she chose to stay in the house of God, and she chose to keep on worshipping, and she chose to keep on making the sacrifice, even though she was hurting really deep down inside after what her husband was doing to her. And one day we all came to church, which is a typical Sunday morning service, and she'd written a song, and she got up there and she sang the song. And when she sang the song, really, what happened was like the presence of God fell in a really, really special way. I mean, God's presence is with us every time we go to church, but on this particular occasion, this lady, she wrote a song out of the pain that she was experiencing, out of the grief that she was experiencing with a marriage breaking up. And she said, Lord, in spite of all the things that I'm experiencing, in spite of all the bad things I'm experiencing, I'm still going to make the sacrifice to worship you. And she did that. And to be honest, when she sang that song, we were the recipients of God's grace that day. And just the worship, it was so just awesome. It was just so fantastic. And we experienced something really, really special through this lady's sacrifice. God gives grace to the humble. He will not forget the humble. And a few months passed, and that family, they got back together again. So, it does work. If you choose to make the sacrifice, if you choose to sit in sackcloth and ashes, so to speak, as Hezekiah did, God will not forget you. He knows where you are, He knows what you're going through, and He will bring you deliverance at exactly the right time. Reach up to God. Reach up to God, and you can do that by just making extra effort to sacrifice, to worship, to pray, to fast, whatever. He will not forget you. God bless you, and we'll see you next time. Bye.